Hello, my name is Aodán Dajathwi, or Jaff as I'm better known. I make Uilleann pipes in my workshop here in Glengormley in the outskirts of Belfast. I've been making Uilleann pipes for maybe 25, maybe as much as 30 years. How I started making Uilleann pipes is a long story. First of all, I got into traditional music when I was a teenager. When I was about 13 or 14, I had good enough taste to listen to the likes of Rory Gallagher, and I was into Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all the rest of it. And I really liked Steel Eye Span as well, and Fairport Convention, and then I discovered traditional music, Irish traditional music. It started off with ballad groups like the Dubliners and Sweeney's Men, and then a band called Planxty, and they had Uilleann pipes in the band. And I was fascinated with this sound, and I'd never heard Uilleann pipes before. In fact, I didn't know there were any other sorts of pipes other than the pipes they have in Scotland and march about with. But in fact, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of different types of bagpipes throughout the world. And this particular bagpipe is quite sophisticated and is blown with bellows and has a 2-octave range. Uilleann pipes were developed probably in the 18th century from earlier types of pipes in Ireland, pastoral pipes, war pipes, etc. There's 2 different types of Uilleann pipes. The early pipes had a narrow bore and had a very, very sweet sound, but they were quite quiet. You know, in a big crowd or a big room, you could hear them, the sound carried, but they were not loud. When a lot of Irish people emigrated to North America, Irish music was actually very popular there, and Irish musicians wanted to perform. So 2 guys from Drogheda emigrated to Philadelphia and developed what is known as concert pitch pipe with a wider bore to give it a much louder sound. That's what I'm making at the moment. I had a friend who was a flute maker, a man called Sam Murray, and I used to play a bit of music with him, and I'd spend a bit of time with him. And between him and a few other pipe makers like Robbie Hughes and Sean McAloon, I took an interest then in actually making the pipes myself. I kind of learned my trade and learned off a man who was originally from Derry, a man called Jack Walsh, who was actually a watchmaker, but he was a very good engineer as well, and he taught me a lot of craft and helped me to make some tools. And then I took off to Australia, and I was in Australia for many years. And while I was in Australia, I actually went to university there and had some part-time work, but I also was able to set up a little workshop and start making pipes in Australia. I was also playing in a band at the time, so it was a nice balance between the solitude of making pipes in the workshop during the day and then playing in a band in the evenings, which was very sociable, obviously. I was often to be seen at the lathe with nothing on but a pair of shorts, covered in sweat and ebony dust, and I looked a bit like a coal miner. A lot of it was self-taught, but yeah, I learned a lot of different people, bits and pieces. In those days you couldn't do any sort of training or apprenticeship. Apparently there are pipe making courses run by the Peabody Uilleann in Dublin these days, but at that time you had to kind of teach yourself and learn bits and pieces here and there. So yeah, I eventually got to the point where I could make something like this, or this is a chandler that I've made recently with an air stop on it, and it took me quite a while to get to this point, but I'm quite pleased with the quality of my work these days. And you're always learning too, you're learning new skills. I mean, I've been making pipes for years, but I would say I've learned some new stuff in the past year or so. I've learned some new wee techniques. I went over to France and spent a bit of time with Jaff, who makes excellent narrow bore pipes. And just in a couple of days, I was able to learn a few new skills that I hadn't learned previously. I suppose there's a particular sound that I'm trying to get. I like a nice sweet sound. I actually have a preference for the old style pipes, which isn't such a problem nowadays because we have amplification and you can use microphones and stuff like that. With this, I've actually arrived at certain very small innovations, such as having a slightly longer chimney, as you would say, which is from the inner bore to the outside. So the wall of the chanters I make is slightly heavier, slightly thicker than some pipes. And I find that helps me to keep the tuning in D, and they have a nice sweet sound. The intention in the future is also to make the narrow bore pipes. A friend of mine, John Hughes, is making me some tools at the moment, so I can make narrow bore pipes pitched in C and B. There's a lot of stages, some of which require a lot of precision, but also a good eye for detail, and there's quite a bit of artistry involved as well. There's early stage woodwork, there's letting it sit for a long time, there's finishing off bores and tone holes, there's turning the outside, finishing the outside, there's attaching mounts, attaching the metalwork. If the customer wants keys to get the flats and sharps, then those have to be fitted, the bag and bellows made. And finally the reeds would be the last part. Sometimes it takes me weeks just to get the reeds the way I want them. You're trying to get a good balance so that the drone reeds require the same pressure as the chanter reed and one's not outblowing the other. And that's the most difficult part, but also the most satisfying part when you get it right. The key work, as you can see, these are spring-loaded keys that are fitted to the chanter. They have to be filed out and shaped. It's sort of akin to making jewellery because you're making shapes and things in metals, in brass or nickel silver. You can finish a set of pipes to the point where you're actually sewing up a velvet bag cover at the end to kind of make it look more decorative. I like the range of skills because I find that it means you're not doing the same thing. You know, one week you might do a lot of turning and getting stuff ready, but then another week you might be just lathering pieces of leather, and I'll be making reeds one day and scraping down bits of cane and trying to get a good sound out of a reed. Other days I'll be making bellows and attaching belts and buckles, and other times I'll be doing metalwork. Yeah, there's quite a range of skills. You're starting out with just a chunk of wood. Creating a bore in a long piece of wood like this is not easy. Timber is a bit unpredictable. There could be problems in the timber, there could be tiny knots or shakes or problems, and you could spend many hours working on a piece and then it could shatter on you. But your turning has to be good, and you have to have a good eye for symmetry to get those shapes. But then, once I have this made and the top made for it, I then have to make a reed for the chanter, which makes the sound. So the air is blowing through here and through the reed and into the chanter. I enjoyed all of that. Most people want to start off with what's known as a basic set or a practice set with the bag, bellows and chanter. Other customers want to have the drone effect. There's 3 drones with Uilleann Pipes, and a set of drones with a chanter, a bag and bellows is called a half set. And that means you can switch the drones off and on depending which key you're playing in. In addition to that, you can have what's called regulators, which is actually a type of pipe which is attached to the stock of the pipes, and the regulators can be played and pressed on with the wrist when you're playing the chanter. So they provide a sort of a chordal or rhythmic accompaniment. It requires an awful lot of skill to make really, really nice music with your chanter and your drones going, plus be playing on these regulators when your 2 hands are already occupied, as are your 2 arms. Most people don't want to add regulators until they've been playing pipes for a while and see how they go, and then they'll come back to me and say, can you add some regulators on to the pipes, Craftsmanship, or I suppose skills in terms of the craft, for me involve doing the best you possibly can, drawing on all the experience you have to make the best possible instrument, and to make sure that nothing that you make is sold to customers until it's made properly and made to my satisfaction. Because I would have beginners coming along to me who actually wouldn't know the difference between good and bad. It would be easy for me to sell them anything, but I actually want to give them the best they can possibly have so that they can play the music, and if there's some problem with the music, it's their fault and not the fault of the pipes. But once they get a handle on it and start to play sort of reasonably well, that the instrument doesn't let them down, that they have an instrument that will work, that will sound right, and that will last them a lifetime. When I make this here, this is going to be around for years after I'm gone, A friend of mine has a set of pipes that were made in 1850. I know another guy who has a set of pipes that were probably made before the Great Irish Famine in the 1820s, 1830s. And God knows how many people have played on those pipes. I want to make something that's going to last not only a lifetime, but it's going to last several lifetimes, and no one will complain about the quality of the instrument. The reeds may come and go and may not be high quality, depends who makes them, but I want the instrument itself to be the best it can be. Something that's made 400 years ago is still playable. Pipes can probably last a lot longer than stringed instruments, so they could be around for hundreds of years. And I want to make something that somebody's going to look at, you know, in a couple of hundred years and think, wow, that's really good. That's great skill and work has gone into that. And they can put a reed in it and it's still going to sound great, you know.